Great. So, show of hands, what's the most innovative company today in your opinion? I mean, not show of hands, just call out some names. Apple, Google, Amazon, Tesla, SpaceX, all great companies. I was at a conference once and somebody said, like, I don't know, some consumer brand I'd never heard about, but she worked there. I think Amazon is the most important, at least the most influential company today. They've gone from a small bookseller when they were founded, not too long ago, to just finishing the first year at over 200 billion in revenues. It's touched every part of our lives in just so many ways. Now, one of the reasons they've been able to do that is the number of new products and just new stuff they've brought to us. And now at Amazon, you're allowed to innovate. Anybody in the company, and 500,000 employees are allowed to innovate and are allowed to bring ideas that they have. And sometimes they become great products that all of us use. In 2011, the Echo was an idea from some employee somewhere in the company. And in 2014, it's a product that we can all use. Now, if you have an idea at Amazon, no matter who you are, no matter how crazy your idea is, it'll be listened to by someone with budget, with authority, somebody with the resources to take it further. But you have to do three things. The first thing you have to do is write a press release. The second thing you do is write a detailed 5-6 page FAQ document. The third thing is you bring in a prototype or show how the customer experience changes, or just whatever else is necessary. If you do those three things, then your idea will be listened to by somebody with resources to advance it. And if they like it, they fund it, and it keeps going on and on and on. So Amazon operates under a set of principles for innovation. The first one is customer obsession, which many of us have heard about. You know, what's the customer benefit? What's the customer experience? The second thing is working backwards. That's why even if you have an idea, a vague idea in your mind, you start out with a press release and an FAQ document, because now you're focused on very specific customer benefits, not on this kind of ill-reformed idea in your mind. The third thing is clarity. You write these things, you write them in full text, no PowerPoint, nothing left to ambiguity. You actually write these full documents, and attendees are supposed to have read them. The idea is to develop what Jeff Bezos calls the institutional yes. In most companies, ideas have to go up through a chain of management, and any no along the way can kill an idea. And that just creates a conservative culture that inhibits innovation. Amazon wants you to say yes to more things, and they've built a culture that lets more managers say yes. Now, if you don't like an idea, you don't have to say no. You have the option to disagree and commit, where you can say, well, I'm not a big fan of this idea, but I'm letting it go forward. In fact, all of my research has shown that the number one barrier to innovation is other people quashing an idea. At Amazon, the Kindle, one of the most popular products ever, was a disagreement to mid-decision. Now, this was released way back when they were a software company, and you can imagine the discussions that were being had. We're a software company. What do we know about hardware? It's a different beast. There's manufacturing, and there's costs, and the margins are different, and blah, blah, blah. But the manager in charge said, well, I'm not sure this is going to work, but I'm going to let it go forward. So consequently, with this thing, Amazon has built what I call an innovation biome, which is an environment where everyone can innovate. And when that happens, you have many things being done all the time. And when more things are being done, you have a higher chance of something being successful. Quantity leads to quality. So the point I want to make is Amazon has an approach. It works for them. It may not work for you or your organizations, but most companies don't have an approach. And when that happens, innovation becomes a shot in the dark. Could happen, but only if the right elements fall in place. And if you want to make innovation something that's institutionalized within your company, then you need to have an approach, and everybody needs to know what it is. So everybody can innovate. Innovation is not the domain of the R&D group, of the product development group, of senior executives, of a small select group of people that are assigned to innovation. It's everybody's job. And it needs to be everybody's job, just as we saw in Amazon. Now, take another example. Take the iPhone, for example. And let's put aside the iPhone. Let's look at the packaging, the box that the iPhone comes in. This is the thing that you never throw away, at least back in the day. Now you had many revs of it. But it's something you keep, and at least in my case, it's sitting in my home office for like a year until my wife comes in and says, oh, this thing's got to go. And you probably all experienced something similar. But the box the iPhone comes in is an innovation that's patented, with 17 designers, including Steve Jobs, listed on that patent. Now, when's the last time anyone thought of packaging as a driver of innovation? This only happens, again, in a culture where everybody innovates. Now, in most companies, packaging is kind of a cost center because it's something that you take and throw away. Apple viewed the packaging as the first interaction a customer had with the product. And that just changed how they think about packaging. And that's why the iPhone box stays in my office for a year. Let's talk about the next big thing. So I'm going to talk about just a few things. I really don't have slides, just the stuff in case anybody wants to kind of see what I write. I send a newsletter out once every 2 or 3 weeks if I'm able to. So, or you can connect with me. And most of the stuff I write is through blogs, and I post on LinkedIn and whatnot. But anyway, let's talk about the next big thing. We all want the next big thing. All of us are thirsty for the next big thing. All of us are continually chasing the next big thing. And I can't count the number of times where when I was at Microsoft, and I was at Microsoft for a long time, where people have come and said, hey, what's the next big thing, If we know what the next big thing is, we can get in there early, we can make a bet, and we can kind of create this dominant presence and reap the rewards. So while all of my research has shown what drives innovation, it also shows some of the misconceptions and fallacies that are associated with innovation. And one of them is this continual search for the next big thing. So there are 3 problems in this chase for the next big thing. The first is next, the second is big, and the third is thing. So apart from that, it's all okay. So let's talk about each of them. Let's look at next. Very rarely is an innovation next, or something new, or something out there. Most innovations are known well in advance, and this is from the beginning of time. Paper currency, an innovation that was used in ancient China, it was used in ancient China for centuries before the Western world adopted it. And the reason for that is not that they didn't know that this wasn't available. It's just that the whole notion of paper representing something of value, instead of gold or silver or pigs or whatever, that was such a far-fetched concept that no one could get their minds wrapped around the fact that this can represent value. It took 80 years from the introduction of the first light bulb to Thomas Edison's light bulb. Alexander Fleming invented or discovered penicillin, and he wrote about his findings, he published them, and they lay dormant for 10 years before somebody else took further action in developing it. And this is not only back in the olden days, even today. If you look at the innovators, they're not the ones who came up with the next thing, they're the ones who rode the trends that were already existing. Microsoft didn't create the first computer operating system, Google didn't create the first search engine, Facebook didn't come up with the first social platform, Apple didn't create the first smartphone or the first portable music player. All of these trends were there. There's no next. You know the trends and you know the developments that are going on in your industry. Now the key for you is to make the right bets and bet on the things that give value to society or provide value to your customers. And that's what separates the innovators from everyone else who's just chasing the next thing. Let's move on to big. So very rarely does something become big right from the start. And now all of us are wired to think big. All of us think big. We have big goals, big bold bets, big hairy audacious goals. That's just how we're wired. We just have to think big. And in fact, that makes sense, because you need something big to happen in order to move the needle, the bigger the company you are especially. But very rarely or probably never does a business become a billion-dollar business without being a small business first. The one thing that all these billion-dollar businesses or all these big businesses had in common was they altered experiences in a unique way. And that's what created an insane amount of value for users and an insane amount of profit for the company. So take Google, one of the heavyweights today. Google started off as an academic experiment by 2 graduate students. The idea was that you could determine the importance or rank of a page simply by looking at how many pages are linked to them and how many other pages are linked to each of them. This wasn't even a commercial initiative, and search results weren't what they were trying to do. Search results were a byproduct of the index that they had created. And in fact, when they realized that our search results are better than everyone else, the founders of Google were ready to sell the company to Excite, a leading search engine at the time, for under $1 million. And Excite refused. So of course, Google became big, very big, we know that. The big happened not by executing on a plan to change the world. The big happened by providing a big change in experience to users, something I call a large experience delta, something from how things were done versus how they got done after Google. And that's what made all the difference. The company, which is now worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, was built primarily by providing a big change to the experience of users. And when the business model now, based on advertising revenues that all of you are well familiar with, that wasn't part of any grand plan. But when the company increased its value to users, society was happy to reward the company. So keep in mind that the big opportunity you're chasing may actually appear as something quite small. And the key is to get into the habit of recognizing opportunities that have a big change in experience, that alter your customers' lives or alter societal value. And that's what's going to become big, not something that you think is going to look big on a P&L. All right, you guys with me so far? Yes. All right, so let's talk about thing, the third fallacy of the next big thing. So in fact, there are two problems with thing. The first is that the thing is not really a thing. It's not the product of what you're trying to sell. It could be something else. It could be a change in the business model. And the second fallacy of thing is that it's actually the innovation is not in the thing you think it is. It's something behind it, something completely unrelated. Well, not unrelated, but something you don't think. Something I call the thing behind the things. So let's look at each of these two misconceptions. So the first thing is that the innovation is not a product. It could be a change in business model or something else. And I can give you a few examples. So American Airlines they didn't invent, but they popularized the concept of frequent flyer miles. Now they were still selling the same thing, the airline seat, but the idea that revolutionized how every single one of us thinks about air travel was simply a program designed to reward those who fly more. And the rewards were highly coveted. First class upgrades and free travel was a very valuable reward for people. And the company, basically, all they were doing was giving their unsold seats to the best customers. Perfect win-win for the customer and the company. Or take Amazon Prime. Very few things have altered commerce as much as Amazon Prime has. Amazon Prime wasn't a product. It's simply it was a membership program where you paid $79 and got free 2-day shipping on just about anything you purchased. Now, prior to the introduction of Prime, express shipping was saved only for special purchases and wasn't used as much. But Prime changed all that. Again, the perfect win-win for the company and the customer. Or the place where I worked for most of my career, Microsoft. Look at Microsoft Office, probably one of the most successful franchises in the history of business that's generated hundreds of billions of dollars in revenues and profits. Microsoft, it wasn't a product. Microsoft Office wasn't a product. It was taking 3 separate productivity applications and putting them in one box. And that customers loved it because they got a full set of productivity applications for one low price. The company loved it because they became virtually the sole provider for these. Again, the perfect win-win. Let's talk about the other aspect of thing, where the innovation is not really the thing you think it is, it's something else. If you go back to the history of innovation, or the history of the world, a lot of people think the greatest innovation is the wheel, something that that created the first information highway, so to speak. But if you study the invention of the wheel, what you learn is that the creation of the wheel was the easy part. The hard part was connecting it to a stable platform. It was the axle that was the thing behind the thing. And it was a combination of the wheel and the axle that had the transformative effect on society. And if you fast forward to now, I remember when personal computers first came out, everybody raced to become the leader in developing personal computers. And sure, personal computers will always be one of the greatest innovations in history. But the thing that let you do magic with them, the thing that made them sing and dance was the software. And today we know that far greater value has been created by software. So software was the thing behind the thing. So anyway, that's enough on the next big thing. But the reason I talk about the next big thing, it's, in all honesty, there really is a little bit of the next big thing. There'll be the next cure for cancer or whatever. But the reason I bring this up is because what we say influences how we think. And if we're always talking about the next big thing, we're going to be looking at something next, something out there, something big, something tangible. But in fact, the real innovation may be small, non-existent. The real innovation may be something small, in a form you really can't identify. And those are the opportunities you don't want to miss. Okay. So let's talk about experiential innovation. So innovation now is more available to every single one of us than ever before. It's democratized. The cost of innovation have really come down dramatically. Everything you need for innovation, people, know-how, software development, manufacturing, any kind of skill you need for innovation is available somewhere in the world at a reasonable price. So, which just makes innovation more accessible to everyone, and all of you should take advantage of it. And the way you take advantage of it, there are many ways, but one of them is through experiential innovation, is with coming up with things that are already there, using stuff that's already out there, not coming up with new things. It's just creatively connecting what's out there. Take the iPhone, for example. Everything that made the iPhone special, the multi-touch screen, the GPS in it, the compression technology, the technology behind Siri, the web and HTML technology, all of this stuff was available for everyone to use. It wasn't even behind the tall, secretive walls of corporate R&D labs. All of this stuff was developed by government-funded research. It was available for anyone to use at no cost. The beauty in this was taking all of these components that everyone had access to and putting them into a single product that all of us lined up to buy. And there are opportunities like this in every single industry. Most innovations are all experiential innovation. It's not about pushing the boundaries of science through R&D or trying to think of something that no one has thought about before. It's about using what's already out there. It's not about developing the airplane. It's about coming up with commercial aviation. It's not about making a better phone or a better camera, but it's about how experiences change when the two of them are in a single device. So I talked a little bit about the experience delta. So the way you do experiential innovation is to always start thinking about this concept that I call the experience delta. How are things done versus how are they done after an innovation? And it's that difference, the delta between the two, that dictates how important your innovation is going to be, or how valuable your innovation is going to be. The bigger the change in experience delta, the more impact your innovation is. And so if you start thinking about your experience delta whenever you're thinking of developing something new, the impact it has on customers or the impact it has on users or society, now you have a simple, efficient, repeatable way to think about innovation. Something you can apply and say, okay, I'm going to bet on this and not bet on this because the experience delta here is greater than over here. So the reason I bring up this concept is that if you want some consistent way to think about innovation, maybe this is something that might help you think about innovation and where to bet. Now, one way to come up with the experience delta is, how do you take something and make it better? I mean, it's easy to say, but really, really hard to do. So one thing that I would suggest, I'm going to maybe talk about this for a minute or two, is using first principles. Now, first principles, how many of you are familiar with this concept? We've got a couple. But basically, this was introduced by Aristotle about 2,500 years ago. It's the notion of taking an idea or a logic or an assumption and bringing it down to its most basic components, the facts that you cannot alter, the facts that you know to be true, and everything else is built on it. And this can help you take assumptions that you made a long time ago and help you rethink them. So Elon Musk uses first principles reasoning as he thinks about his product, and he's talked about this publicly. One example he talks about is batteries. Very few things have influenced Elon Musk's success than batteries. Now, prior to the introduction of the cars and the Tesla and the space initiatives, conventional wisdom dictated that batteries are expensive. And when they're expensive, they can be used in a scalable manner. So what do? Well, if you think like most people, you use incremental thinking, then you'd say, well, I can go and negotiate and really squeeze my supplier and get 5%, 10% off. Or maybe I can bring manufacturing in-house and save some more money. But using first principles reasoning, you wouldn't do that. You would actually take a battery and bring it down to its most basic components. So what's a battery made up of? It's made up of aluminum and carbon and nickel and a few other elements. that are all put together into the shape of a battery. So now, instead of buying a battery, if you just bought these individual elements, which literally cost a few bucks, they really don't cost anything, and you used your innovation and you used your creativity to combine them into the shape of a battery, then the cost of a battery would be orders of magnitude cheaper. And now you're not thinking of powering cars, you're lighting up entire cities. So your use cases go up. So that's how first principles could work. Most of you are in a situation where you're doing something because you've done it probably in the same way for a long time. But if you take a first principles approach, you'd probably question every assumption. You'd probably question why every single thing is done. And what you learn is that if you question every assumption, you learn that assumptions made a long time ago may not hold true today. Now, the reason I bring this up is because first principles reasoning allows you to rise to a level of abstraction that you're unable to do. And it helps you rise to the level of abstraction by going down to the most basic levels, the most fundamental levels of your problem. So something I'd encourage you to think about is think about how you take your process, your products, your approaches, whatever it is you do, and rethink them right from the start. Just question them. It's something that I'm doing, actually. I'm working on a new book. I wasn't going to talk about this today, but you guys seem like a friendly crowd. And it's hard to do, but I'm thinking that, okay, the first time I wrote a book and shared all my ideas, but now I'm working on a different topic and I have ideas in my mind, and if I go through the conventional process of writing a book, it's going to take 1.5 years before it gets into the reader's mind. That just seems so inefficient. I don't know a way to do it better. I mean, I've thought of the usual things, write a series of blogs and posts and blah, 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 which I'm doing, but again, I'm in this process of first principles reasoning. How do I get my thoughts from my research into my readers' minds in a more efficient way? And hopefully it'll come to me. All right, let's move a little bit and talk about creativity. And actually, I'm very nervous about speaking about creativity to you guys because I've never talked about creativity to a room full of creatives. So if I make it alive for the next 3 minutes, I'll consider that a minor victory. So how do you bring out creativity? I mean, all innovation starts with creativity. Without creativity, you basically are doing the same thing you've always been doing. You're just maybe improving marginally. But if you want these world-changing, transformative innovation, you need to start with creativity. In fact, all the great innovations we think about and use are all the most creative. Now, unfortunately for most of us, most of these innovations have come from minds such as Einstein and Newton and Da Vinci and Gates and Musk and Jobs and all these people who are reported to have genius-level IQs. And if coming up with transformation requires us to hire a bunch of Einsteins, we might as well give up now because that's never going to happen. But if you look at the science of creativity, you can try to replicate the output of these great minds by assembling them. So if you look at creativity, creativity is actually made up of 2 traits: creative potential and creative achievement. Now, creative potential is the ability to come up with something new. And creative achievement is the ability to follow through on that urge. So without creative potential, you've got nothing new. And without creative achievement, you simply have daydreams. Now, an interesting study has found that, has studied the link between creativity and intelligence. So now creative potential is actually linked to IQ. The higher the IQ, the more creative potential you are. They just link together, and probably because both creativity and intelligence draw on these complex brain processes. But what's interesting is that IQ vanishes at a threshold of 120. And so while an IQ of 120 is certainly high, it's by no means near the genius-level IQs that all these brilliant innovators have had. In fact, the IQ of an average college graduate is about 115. So with creative potential, you need to be smart, but only up to a point. With creative achievement, the study found that there's no link between creative achievement and IQ. So creative achievement is the ability to follow through happens at every level of intelligence. So what does this mean in a practical setting? Well, it means that you and all your organizations have all the components required to build any kind of transformative innovation you want. But you need to put them together, you need to assemble them, you need to curate them. So And that's where most companies kind of come up short. If you take somebody with high creative achievement skills and put them in a situation that requires high creative potential, you failed before you've started and you don't even know it. And that happens all the time. You see someone who's been successful in a project and you say, hey, let's have this person think about new ways to grow the business. Again, it becomes a shot in the dark, because if the person is high on the creative achievement scale and placed in a situation where potential is required, then that's a mismatch. But if you take this person and pair that individual with someone high on the creative potential scale, then you've got a winning combination. And then you're able to achieve any innovation you desire, which is one of the reasons why co-founders that complement each other have created some of the world's greatest innovations. So the point I want to make here is that creativity is there, but if you have to think about it and assemble the different components for creativity if you want to achieve transformational innovation. I got about 3 minutes and 55 seconds, and that's counting down very quickly. So I can either talk about another topic, or I can open it up for a couple of questions, whatever you guys prefer. Sure. All right, then I have a couple minutes to talk about the innovation biome. I was kind of hoping for the questions, because I'm not really well prepared to talk about it. Thanks. No, I'm just kidding. I wrote a book called The Innovation Biome. If I'm not able to talk about it, I shouldn't be here. So what's the innovation biome? I gave this is the topic of the book that all of you are going to get a copy of. I use the biome metaphor to represent innovation because that's it seemed most appropriate. So what's a biome? So biome, if you remember in kind of middle school geography, biome are these vast regions of the earth, like the deciduous forest and the tropical forests and deserts and grasslands and tundras and all these big areas of the earth that influence what happens within them, that influence kind of what lives and what dies. Biomes are comprised of several ecosystems, and which are essentially these interactive communities that work with each other. So the reason I use this metaphor is, think of your organization, your company, your corporation as a biome. It's got its own ecosystems, it's got its own rules and structures and teams and departments and organizations and all these things that all kind of exist within a company. So in your case, there may be a product development environment or product development ecosystem, a finance ecosystem, a sales ecosystem, a client service ecosystem, or whatever else is in there. And all of these things live together and they work with each other. But the thing is that they all thrive or fail as one. So even though they all have different charters, the overall success is determined by the success of the biome, your environment, your company. So the thing that I learned is that the most basic foundational fundamental elements of a biome are what dictate how productive a biome is. Or in the case of your company, it's the most basic the most basic components of your company that determine how innovative you're going to be. In a natural biome, it's going to be things like soil and rain, soil and temperature and precipitation and season, just fundamental characteristics that determine how productive it's going to be. So take seasons, for example. Biomes with a longer growing season are more productive than biomes with a shorter growing season. That's a simple, straightforward thing. The same way in companies, organizations with a longer growing season for innovation are going to be more productive than organizations with a shorter growing season. But unfortunately, in most companies, all these innovation initiatives are one-off events, innovation sprints and innovation contests, maybe even coming to events such as this one, which is a one-off thing. These are one-off things that are not woven into the fabric of the company. And unless innovation is woven into the fabric of a company, like a natural biome, your innovation is almost guaranteed to be fruitless. So this is an example of the tropical rainforest. And the reason I use this example is because your innovation, your biome, your corporate biome can be a tundra with like a permanently frozen layer of soil where really nothing grows. Or it can be a tropical rainforest with just abundant growth, high levels of productivity. And that's how innovation activities work. It's like the soil in the rainforest. It's not the best. It's kind of nutrient deprived, but what it has is that it gets absorbed into anything and everything that's growing. And when you have a lot of growth and when you have a lot of trees, that provides the best opportunity for one of them to break through the canopy. And when that happens, and this is the kapok tree in the tropical rainforest, and when that happens, that's when you're going to get your breakthrough. So all of us are looking for our own K-pop tree. All of us want the breakthroughs, and all of us are trying to do things to get us there. But it only happens when you have that environment where you're putting every reasonable idea to work. And in fact, I thought of this yesterday. I think of myself as brilliant for that. But I was able to tie this together because Amazon, the company, is no different from Amazon, the rainforest, which is actually what this is, where you have a system to put all reasonable ideas to work, and quantity leads to quality. So innovation is, so if there's one thing you should take away, innovation is the multiplier effect of many, many, many small things. It's very rarely a result of one large bet. And I think that's all the time I have for today, so I'll answer questions later, but thank you very much for your time, and thanks for having me here.